Hi, I'm Ruben Saltzman with Structure Tech Home Inspections, and today I'm going to talk about water softener installation defects. So to cover this one, instead of showing you a bunch of photos in this video, I thought it'd be easier to just come on location. So I am downstairs in my own basement, and I'm talking about my own water softener. And we're going to look at how a bunch of this is installed and compare this to ways that they should not be installed. So as a home inspector, one of the first things I'm looking at a water softener actually has to do with the electrical service. On a traditional electric service installation where you have metallic water distribution piping throughout the whole house, you got metal water pipes. Typically it's either going to be steel or copper tubing. All of that piping needs to be bonded. It needs to be electrically continuous. And the whole idea here is that if somebody were to take a hot, also known as an energized wire, and they accidentally touched it to something metallic, like a metal faucet, a metal pipe, something that all of this piping connects to, if they accidentally touched it with that, if the system was not bonded, you would electrify everything in the house that comes in contact with those all at the same time, and someone could get electrocuted. But when it's all properly bonded, it has a very good path back to the earth. And if you were to touch one of these pipes with a hot wire, you'd overload the circuit breaker. Whatever that hot wire was going to would have such a good path back to the earth that you'd trip a breaker. So I know it's getting a little bit nitty-gritty details here, but the bottom line is all of your metal water piping needs to be bonded to help make sure it's safe. And when you install a water softener, this is a very common place for somebody to break that continuity. And we'll take a closer look at mine here. So as you can see, the water distribution piping for my home comes in up at the floor. The water piping goes through a water meter. I've got this shutoff valve on here. I could talk about that another day. And then the water piping comes up, it comes over, and it goes into the water softener. And here, where it goes into the softener, the water distribution piping transitions to PEX, a plastic material, and it passes through a plastic bypass valve on the softener. And the whole purpose of this valve is that if the water softener goes bad, or we need to replace it, or something goes on, we can actually flip both of these valves, and you can have the water bypass the softener, and you can have unsoftened water going to the entire house. That's a whole other topic, but for now, understand that our continuous electrical path is broken where we transition to plastic piping, and to help reestablish that, the water softener installer took a couple of bonding clamps, and then they ran a thick copper wire between the two to help jumper that. And this makes sure that everything is properly bonded. A lot of water softener manufacturers will actually give you a little clamp that's supposed to be used to jumper between the two pipes, but if they're not located right next to each other properly, this is another way to do it. So if we have a house where that bonding jumper is missing, it's just not installed, it is something that we put in our home inspection reports. It's worthy of repair. It's not that big of a deal to fix it, probably about a 5-minute fix for somebody who is qualified to do the repair. The next thing we come across a lot is an improper drain hose installation. The water softener is going to have discharge water, and it needs to be discharged to an appropriate location. The right location would be the drainage system for the house. It's not supposed to be discharging into a sump basket and then being discharged out into the yard. It should go to the same drain system as everything else. Now in Minnesota, it's typically going to be a floor drain. And the problem we find with that is that you have a drain hose going directly into the floor drain. That's the most common issue we find. And the concern there is it creates a potential cross connection. If the floor drain were to back up with sewage, that water has the potential to touch the drinking water in the house. So the discharge line on the water softener always needs to have an air gap. And there's a bunch of different ways to do it. You know, water softener manufacturers give you this little diagram. It shows like a block of wood, and you take a little zip tie and you just kind of raise the discharge hose. The manufacturers show this diagram. I've never seen anybody actually do that in real life. What's much more common is something that looks like this, where you just get a little gooseneck with the discharge pipe and you have a minimum of a 1.5 inch air gap between the discharge hose and the top of the floor drain. This is a nice, beautiful, proper installation. Another common thing that we find with water softeners is having them plugged into an extension cord. Oftentimes when an installer comes in to put in the water softener, it's not going to be a licensed electrician. They'll come in, they'll say, hey, the water softener needs to be installed here. There's no receptacle within range. You are required to have a receptacle that it plugs directly into. Would you like me to just put the water softener in and then you can hire your own electrician to come in and put in the receptacle? And then the homeowner will say yes, and the installer will say, all right, well, it's all set to go, and maybe, you know, here's an extension cord, we can test it, make sure it's working, but don't leave it plugged into the extension cord. I'm sure all the water softener installers say this, but a lot of homeowners just do it anyways, and they don't get around to having an electrician come out. Nothing permanently installed is supposed to be plugged into an extension cord. It's always supposed to be plugged into its own outlet. So the fix here is get an electrician, have an outlet installed, or receptacle, whatever you want to call it. And then the final issue we find is having softened water provided to everything. Now, the traditional way to do it is to have soft water plumbed to everything inside the house, with the exception of cold water to the kitchen faucet. I'll come back to that in a second. And you don't run softened water to stuff outside the house, such as the lawn irrigation system, also known as the sprinkler system, and the outside hose bibs or outside hose faucets, or sillcocks if you're really old school. You don't run softened water to those things because it would be a tremendous waste of softened water. And if you're watering your lawn or doing any of that other stuff, you don't need softened water. I don't think your lawn even likes softened water. It's probably bad for your lawn to do that. I'm not a lawn care expert. If you saw my lawn, you'd know that. But I know you don't need softened water there. It's a tremendous waste. So those lines should always bypass the water softener. And let's take a closer look at mine. So we got the water come in from the street. The water comes up, it comes over, it goes into the water softener, but there's also a line here that doesn't go into the softener. We've got this line here. It comes over, it goes up. We've got a full 1-inch pipe going up to the sprinkler system. And then we've got a couple of pipes going to the outside faucets. We've got the front faucet and rear faucet, or maybe the other way around. I don't remember. And then finally, we've got one more line. This is a 1/2-inch line that goes up to the cold side on the kitchen faucet. And let's talk about that for a second. Here in the Twin Cities, it is standard practice to run a cold water line to the kitchen faucet because the idea is we don't want to have softened water going to the kitchen. It contains added sodium when it's softened water, and people with a restricted sodium intake probably don't want that additional sodium. How much? I'm not going to get into it for this video. I can tell you it's not a ton, but if you're on a very restricted diet, it can make a difference. So it's standard practice to run an unsoftened line to the kitchen faucet. I don't like this practice, and I don't like it because soft water is there to help protect stuff. It helps prevent your faucets from getting all gunked up with mineral deposits, and it helps save your coffee maker. It does a lot of good. And I've lived in homes where I had hard water going to the kitchen faucet, and I would go through about a coffee maker a year, and my kitchen faucet would get gunked up and it would get destroyed within about a year or two. I'd have to keep contacting the manufacturer to get a new faucet that was covered under warranty. And it was this, that, and the other. I had so many different problems. And finally, one day I said, you know what? To heck with this. I'm running soft water to the kitchen faucet, and I've never been happier. That was probably 10 years ago now. And that was the first thing I did when I moved into this house. Was I ran a new line. I bypassed the bypass. I made sure that it was softened water going to the kitchen faucet. And I think it's a good thing. Now, that's a total tangent. This is not a home inspection thing. We don't foist my beliefs on softened water to the kitchen faucet on our home inspection clients, but this is my video. So I'm just sharing my 2 cents on that. And I think that's the end. That concludes everything I have to share about water softener installation defects. That's certainly not all there is. There's a lot more that could go wrong, but those are the most common things that we find during home inspections. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.